off again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It's my favourite night of the week, Friday night. The three Amigos, myself, Steve Hasty and Mitch. Good evening, lads.
Evening, Steve.
Evening, Steve.
Good to see you. And the best thing about this weekend is, lad, we can't get beat.
Exactly.
Right,
I thought
exactly.
you came with time off, Steve.
Dear me, there's always plenty to talk about. And I think me, you, and all the people who like to watch on a Friday night would be absolutely lost if we said we're having a night off. So, it's the one show I think everybody looks forward to. It's the show that helped build the channel up. And as we always say, we never take the viewers for granted. So
I'd have still come in, Steve. I'd have done my own training.
Exactly.
Brilliant stuff. As always, we'll leave this pretty much open to people, and I think really when I see we've got nearly 200 people waiting to watch, I always feel we should just throw it open to whoever's in the chat. And ironically, Darren Cowan came in straight away with this: is Rio Ferdinand the most clueless pundit on TV? And to be honest, you must have read me mind, Darren, because I had this already set up. Rio Ferdinand, a lot of them hate him, don't like him, but round your money up and take over the club then. That was Rio Ferdinand. He's come out with a few more classics over the course of the season about Newcastle. Steve, we've had this conversation about Rio Ferdinand before and other pundits. Let's not forget, though, we have got a few in our corner. Stan Collymore, who at times, it has to be said, has had a few ricks with Newcastle fans on social media, came out with that. Steve Bruce and Mike Ashley are the worst double act in Premier League history. So there's been a bit of yin and there's been a bit of yang this week on social media. But Rio Ferdinand, I mean, I can't remember exactly what his involvement is, but he had some kind of connection, didn't he, with Mike Ashley? So it's no surprise, really, to see him sticking up for either the owner or the manager at times when they're both under pressure.
Yeah, I think doesn't his clothing line is it part of Sports Direct Cartel or something like that? I don't even know what his clothing line is. And I tell you the truth, I've never ever seen anything. Certainly doesn't sell in the Northeast. Maybe that's why. Maybe we're finding out that because it doesn't sell in the Northeast, he's having a pop that way. Maybe we should. If we'd all been wearing Ferdinand's gear, maybe he wouldn't have been so scathing towards Newcastle United fans or so sarcastic. I don't know what the purpose of it was, whether it was a little piece of sort of sarcasm, whether he'd been getting grief from others on social media, or whether he just thought he was being clever and doing Mike Ashley a favour. But in all three cases, it was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong thing to say, and it doesn't stand up to any form of scrutiny, Steve. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is weird to see, him coming out with stuff, and we've been through it before, Mitch. We touched on it last week. A lot of it's just clickbait, isn't it? It's the reason these guys do it, and they're either doing it off their own back to get their own social media, their own social media platforms a bit of a boost, or they're doing it because they're working for a media outlet, which probably tells them, wind Newcastle fans up. That's what we need.
Look, you're right in that respect. That's easy, and we're bad at biting. We will bite. I think wasn't there some statistic about Richard Keys' blogs that when he wrote to Newcastle one, he got 10 times the amount of clicks as he did off of everybody else. So there is that element to it. I tell you the thing about this one. The last comment I remember Ferdinand making was about Rafa, and he should buy the players with his own money or something along those lines. And when this is what's odd about Ferdinand coming out with something random like that. That makes people question this connections and associations to Mike Ashley and his various vehicles. Is that why is he picking this moment to taunt the fans in this way? And one wonders, is he got wind of something? And if he has, is Rio being pushed out as the one to stir the pot? Go on, Rio, say this. This will get them snapping. It's baffling. Why taunt in that particular way? Because he just comes across as clueless. It's nobody knows more about bloody trying to get the fans to buy a club than me and Steve.
Yeah.
We spent a year of our life working on it. And it just feels like a taunt to me, and there's just like out of nowhere, and he's such an unusual character to do it, and along the lines of that Rafa comment, it just feels like he's being put up to do it because of his connections to the Ashley Empire.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it'll run and run. We're going to have more of this, but as the season, reaches its either pathetic climax or exciting climax, we're either going to stay up by the skin of our teeth, or we're going to drop like the proverbial stone. So it will be interesting to see, who jumps ship, because there's been a few do that in the last few weeks as well. We'll talk a little bit about football before I come to Alan Greaveson's question, which I put up on the screen there. I mean, last week, lads, you're running out of superlatives to describe how bad Newcastle are, Steve. It's getting to that stage now where, and I mean, we've all collectively lived through some pretty awful teams and some team displays, but last week was up there, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the manager down, or is it the manager up at the moment? I'm not too sure which way.
Which way does it go?
Let's say from the manager down, from what was happening on the touchline to what was happening on the pitch. Let's start with the manager and his formation, or his lack of formation, or his lack of commitment to his team. I mean, how many weeks have we spoken about his body language, about the words he's used at press conferences? We actually said the week before that he would be bigging up Brighton, which he did. We said we put stuff on Twitter about it. All of the usual cliches. They're a good team. We're going to find it difficult. We're going to go there, and we've got. We're going to make a fist of it, and all that type of thing. He can talk a great talk, at times when he wants to. But then we stepped onto the pitch. But we stepped on as 11 beaten men. That team looked from the first 5 minutes like they had not got a clue what they were doing. They were all over the place, defensively, midfield, and what little we had in attack. It was embarrassing. It was on par with, I would say, one of the worst performances I've seen in the last 30 odd years. And then to be told that, we hit the post. Great, yeah, we hit the post. And then to wheel out the player who hit the post to tell us that we all should be rolling our socks up and we're in a fight and stuff like that. And I just by that point I'd lost the will to live, Steve. I honestly had, in terms of listening to anything over the weekend about Newcastle United. It was just absolutely, as you say, sublimely abysmal. Where are we heading? I don't know. But let's hear what Mitch has got to say, because obviously Mitch is watching it with I'm watching it on my own. I'm wondering whether Mitch is getting twice as angry or 3 times as angry watching it with a group of other supporters.
Right.
Yes, I mean 6-0 on aggregate, Mitch. 6-0 on aggregate against a team which is down there fighting with us. Do you know what I mean? It's that in itself. That in itself is abysmal.
Well, I tell you what I did because of the kickoff time, Steve. Because of the regulations here, I actually watched it at home because the bars have to close at 1. So I would have got the first half and then had to come home for the second half. So I watched it at home. But what I did was I jumped onto the second half with Liam Kennedy and their watch party at the Shields Gazette, which was quite fun. And like I said to them, I'm sitting watching on a box that's got 60,000 worldwide TV channels and just as many movies and series accessible. And I'm choosing at 1:45 in the morning to watch this crap. and that's the frustration. That was one of the most abjectly bad performances from a black and white team I think I've seen in all my times going to the game, in terms of collective effort, in terms of tactics, in terms of awareness of the situation. Basics, so many basics. We're back to where we're our goals in the most danger when we've got to throw in our own half. We're back to a situation where fullbacks are constantly turning wingers in on our stronger foot and allowing them to have a crack. We're back to a situation where the gap between the front line and the midfield is sort of it's wider than the Pacific Ocean. You know, it's just there's no cohesion, there's no plan, there's no strategy. And then you've got the manager stood on the sideline with his hands in his pockets, oozing out all the bad body language, while his many assistants are running around making strange hand signals with their hands that he then occasionally copies. And I just no, it looks awful. And I've now consigned myself to the point where we're done. I've made peace with relegation now. And if it doesn't happen, then great. But on the face of what's going on at the minute, what we're hearing still coming from inside the camp, and there's not just a mole. There's a bloody what is the collective noun for a group of moles? Is it a dig or a mine or something like that?
Squad.
Is it a squad of moles? Yeah, it probably is.
What do you call a group of moles?
There's got to be. There will be.
There will be a name.
There'll be a collective noun for it. Like,
Google it.
The first two moles.
You know, and
male moles are called boars, females are called sows, and a group of moles is called, wait for it, a labour.
A labour.
A labour of. Well, they're certainly labouring on the pitch as well. And so, yeah, a labour of moles. There you go.
But, right, don't make that political, for God's sake. It's we'll have people fighting about that next. Alan Greaveson's point, let's go to that. And he says, as we are likely to play the midfield diamond again, who would be in the mid and who would be up front? Good question, Alan. It's a question we've talked about a lot on the show. We've talked about formations. We've talked about different players. We've all got our own opinions. I think, to be honest, when me, Mitch and Steve have talked about it, we're not too far off picking more or less the same team, and we seem to find that in the chat. I mean, has your mind changed? Has your mind changed, lads? I mean, I know I'm more of a Richie fan than you guys are.
I've been and bought an old fruit machine, and what I've done is I've changed the reels, and I put all the outfield players' names on the reels, and then every weekend I put 50p in it and bang the thing, and I just read the three names that come up because I think that's how he picks it.
That's what Steve Brewster I was going to say. So, what do you do, Steve? What would you do, Mitch? Sorry, go on.
I wouldn't have any of that midfield that played on Saturday. I wouldn't play. I wouldn't be playing a diamond either. I'd be playing a flat midfield with two wide men. I'd have Murphy on one side, I'd have Richie on the other, and I'd have a two central midfielders of the two long staffs. That's who I would play. That's my midfield. It wouldn't be a diamond. It would be midfield designed to play in front of a back four, but more advanced with a bit more mobility, with two wide men who can get down the line and can cross a ball, and to be providing ammunition to two strikers who are actually going to be in the box, feeding off what comes to them. That's the basic, simple tactics that I would be using from now to the end of the season. Tactics that I haven't seen all season, by the way.
The current situation screams back to basics for me.
Yeah.
Because, I listened to some of the reaction to the game against Brighton, and everybody talking about Potter, and he's technically astute, and he's really tactically aware, and he outdid Bruce. He didn't. His tactics are quite simple. His formation is quite simple, and the players, believe it or not, know what they are doing within that system. Whereas we have players who are constantly looking to the bench for ideas, because at times they look like they don't know what they're doing within whatever system they're being asked to play. And that's the difference. And we've got to just go back to basics.
Yeah.
And stop overthinking.
Exactly. I'd also have a situation where the two men that I've got in the centre of the back four would be talking to each other again, because for some reason on Saturday that style seemed to go out of the window. I wouldn't have a situation where Lascelles would go walkabout and end up with Clark having to cross over to the other side to follow his man, while Dummett's standing on one side, and you've got Manquillo who's all over the place on the other. and the gaps are just opening up. Simply that you mentioned there the tactics. It was the simple approach of two mobile strikers who came inside and moved across the back line and just created the gaps for somebody else to step into, because our two central defenders would go with them every single time, and it was embarrassing. And this is basic schoolboy stuff. This isn't something that comes from an FA coaching badge or a coaching manual book or anything like that. It's basic stuff, solid back four, solid midfield, and two strikers. Do you remember those days, Mitch? Two strikers. You remember when we used to do that? Now
it's done.
we've got false sixes, false fours.
Oh, Jesus!
We've got more falses than bloody. Tell you that Katie Price has ever had. It's unbelievable.
And that's the problem. It's like it's all very well and good saying, right, we're going to play this new system with split strikers and a false nine at the tip of a diamond, and it sounds very clever, but it's just an over-egged pudding, and so many ingredients are off.
Yeah,
and so it just doesn't. It isn't working.
No,
it looked like it was very briefly in 2 games, but you've got to go back to results. 2 wins out of 20.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you've got the embarrassment of a manager who turns around and says, you know what, we've played really well. We've only been beaten off Chelsea and Man United. And you go, have you forgotten we played Crystal Palace like? Have you forgotten we played Leeds? And we can go on and all the way back through. And he says, we've the last 5 games we've done really well. We've picked up 3 points. That means we lost 12 points. That's my CSE grade 2. It tells us that. It's not a degree in mathematics. It's not pure maths. It's simple, basic adding up, And it's these things that he's coming out with. And nobody's picking them up. Nobody from the TV, nobody from the media is getting a hold.
The thing is,
the local lads aren't there to get a hold. They're not even there to question them. That's one problem. But even the TV people on the interviews that they're given, because we have such sullied, wet, basically people who are presenters. They're not analysts. They're not football people. They're just there because they look good. They can look good in front of a camera and say a few posh words and keep the continuity going. But when it comes to actually interviewing people, it's just a case of it's like you see on TV all the time now. They give them the opportunity to speak and then they just move on to another topic. They don't analyse and they don't question the words that come out and start to build up and say, well, hang on, Steve, you're saying this, but defensively you were all over the place. How can you justify that when you've only won picked up 3 points out of the last 15 and you've only won 2 games out of the last 20? How does that fit in with your model? And you talk about the shape and you talk about the style, Mitch, but that diamond that what the people are talking about and that sort of movement across the front 3, that was fine when you had Almiron, ASM and Wilson. We had a totally unfit and ill-prepared Almiron, and we had no ASM and no Wilson. And yet, for some reason, he decided to still go out and play the same sort of football, or with the same what he thought formation. And it's just pointless. It's pointless. You might as well have gone out with 8 players on the pitch. I thought Fraser was shocking. I thought his performance was atrocious. I thought Joe Linton, I'd forgotten he was on the pitch. And then in the second half, I know that the count that we've had for the likes of Shelvey and Hendricks was bad, but they were barely in the game. And not only that, but their body language showed they probably didn't even want to be in the game. That's just as worrying. If they'd gone out there and they'd put a performance in of effort and still got beat 3-0, I would have gone, well, at least they went down fighting. But they didn't even do that. They were beating men from the minute they walked on that pitch.
The big blow last weekend, of course, and this ties in with Tom's question, was, who did the lads think will replace Hayden out for the rest of the season? I mean, Thursday night, of course, Malcolm isn't a big fan of Hayden, but even he admitted last night that he's been a little bit more consistent, and he will be missed because he looks as if he cares. Well, it's a huge blow, and these are the kind of things that happen, Mitch, when you're down at the bottom.
And typically it was a stupid accident, The lad just rolled into the back of his leg. This is why, the reason I say we've got to move away from the formation.
Yeah.
And we can't be hammering square pegs into round holes like he has been doing all season. Got to get away from that. Because, that come back to that performance, it was pathetic. To use a boxing, analogy, we didn't lay a glove on them in the first half at all. Referee would have stopped it if it was a boxing match at half time. Because we just didn't defend ourselves and didn't lay a glove on them. And so who replaces Hayden? Well, we all know it's going to be Hendrick. Because he's Bruce's favourite next cab off the rank. If he's going to play the same formation. If he doesn't play the same formation, then he's got the opportunity to change it up. But yeah, to answer the question, who replaces Hayden, it'll be Hendrick.
Yeah, it will be. There's no doubt about that. He shouldn't be anywhere near the first team, but he will be. He'll be the one who's in. And let's see, we've got that to look forward to next weekend, not this weekend, luckily. There was a lot of talk after the match, Steve, and subsequently over the weekend about an international player looking to leave. And I think a lot of people tended to think that was potentially Almiron. Apparently, in some of his quotes, I'm always very dubious about some of the stuff that comes out when it's a quote from a foreign newspaper. But it seems, it was him, and sounds as if he's wanting to jump ship. Again, pretty unsettling, isn't it, when you're in a relegation battle and players aren't happy and talking about leaving before the season's coming to an end and we've reached a position of safety.
Yeah, well, if what I heard was true, then we also had one international player who didn't turn up last Saturday because he had already booked an early morning flight on Sunday for to go to play international duty. So you're going, well, what's that all about? Surely that can't be right. Steve, we haven't got that many international players. So it should be pretty easy to work out who it's going to be, or at least work out on a level of probabilities who it's going to be. But that's typical of the modern day footballer now, isn't it? Looking to jump ship because they feel as though nothing to do with their performances, nothing to do with their attitude, but because they've got a win that the team could be going and playing in a different division, that they want to bail out. That's just, it's the modern way of footballers at times. And we know that footballers are selfish people. We know it's a selfish game. We know it's a very, very short career, and that they're a commodity that just moves on. And we know that they have agents that treat them as a commodity. Some players, it's like people who buy a house and then they'll do the house up and then move to the next house in the hope that they've created a little bit of value, and then they move up the ladder exponentially as the value of properties come in. You've got agents who treat players just like that, right? You come in, you're going to be there for 2 years. You've signed a 4-year contract. You'll still be worth something to the football club, but I'll be able to persuade them to move you on. And if things aren't going right on the pitch, then they'll be desperate to move you on, and we'll move you on, and I'll get my cut, you'll get your cut. And that's the way that modern footballers are treated now. It's not like John Anderson when he played for Newcastle, and he told the story about standing on the steps at St James's Park after being told that he was being sold to Sunderland, and then comes back and he's walking back up the steps, and Jim Smith says to him, "Hey, well, thanks very much, John. You've been fantastic. You've been a great servant for this club. I wish you all the best at Sunderland." At which point John tells us that he told him that he wasn't actually signing for Sunderland. At which point Jim Smith turned like that and called him all the names under the sun and told him he'd never play for Newcastle again. That's football, isn't it? That sums up. And that was 30 odd year ago. That was probably 1990, probably a little bit earlier than that. Would have been 88, 89. Dealers came in after that, so it would have been 89, end of the 89 season. But there's no loyalty in football. There's no loyalty from footballers. The only people with loyalty are the fans, and our loyalty is being stretched and stretched and stretched, and we're on that elastic band. And I generally think that elastic band is ready to snap now.
You're not
But
wrong.
also, like we've banged on about for months. Let's see what the finances are like for the start of next season. Let's see what kind of signings are made over the close season. Let's see where these players are going to get the money that they think they're going to get from other clubs, because the money's going, and the money's going quickly, and it's not being replaced quickly enough, and therefore, some of these guys who might want to look to jump ship might find they'll not quite get what they want if they want to jump ship, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, for me, I think Liam's article in the Gazette this week about the finances was a cold, hard reminder to Newcastle fans, the reality of the situation if we do go down, and there isn't a pot of gold at the end of the Mike Ashley rainbow. We know there's never been an over-exuberance to spend money, but with a relegation, if a takeover, and I know we all laugh when we say this these days, but if a takeover is still in the offing, he's not going to spend any money. And there isn't, Mitch, a world-class coach at the helm like there was the last time we went down. No. That's the big concern, and that's why I think a lot of us are worried this time round. In
the last 2 relegations, he's got lucky in having somebody able to steer the ship back up in one. This relegation won't be so smooth, because who's there? Is Bruce gonna bring us back up? Well, he's got a great record in the Championship, as everybody kept telling me when he was appointed, and as we kept pointing out to everybody else, because he relegates the teams there in the first place, and that's the frustration, is that if he is still hanging around because he's being rewarded for his loyalty, that fills me with dread, because we'll be looking at an empty ground as well.
Yes,
and that's, as fans return to the grounds, that fan income on game day is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah,
for every club, not just smaller clubs that live hand to mouth, for every club, because that hole in the finances needs to be plugged. And if we're looking at 25,000 in the ground, that's going to hurt with just as bad. And that Championship is like, as the Leeds lads would tell you, it's like quicksand. And the more you struggle, the further down you get pulled. You've got to skip out at your first attempt, and there's other teams in there that could tell you the same. Forest, even the Mackhams.
Yeah. The other problem you've got with dropping into that division, Mitch, is the very fact you mentioned there the whole setup, the number of games, but it's the tactics that you need to play. You know what? We've got a manager who doesn't do tactics. And so you begin to think to yourself, well, first of all, how toxic for those that do go into the ground next season if you're relegated and he's still there, how toxic is going to be? Because people aren't going to forgive Steve Bruce for any of this, If we manage to survive and stay in the Premier League, he's not going to be vaulted as some sort of hero. If he takes it down and he's still there next season, then it's going to be more toxic than it would have been if he'd managed to save her, but we were allowed in at the moment because of the fact we've gone 2 out of 20. These are the imponderable. These are the questions that we're now starting to look at, and it's quite sad that we're looking at it now at in sort of the tail end of March, where there's still 9 games to go, but we're starting to look across the horizon and seeing with foreboding what could be coming our way. Not just relegation, not just being once if we ended up into the Championship, but how we would get out of the Championship. And as you say, on the previous 2 occasions, we got out because of well-worked plans by managers who had players on site who knew what they were doing. And this guy, well, we already know that he doesn't have the dressing room on his side. The dressing room, those that are in the dressing room who want to leave, there'll be those in the dressing room who can't leave because nobody, as you say, nobody will take them. And you've got none of them that consider the manager or very few of them consider the manager having any iota of a clue of what he's doing anyway. So, what is how does his body language? How is he going to turn around and boost those players if he takes them down and go, right, lads, I'm gonna change tactics. We're gonna try this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna get back up at the first hurdle. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen.
Bruce has had an easy ride on two fronts because of COVID. On the fact that there's nobody in the ground to pillory him, and like we touched on before, he gets away with easy press conferences where the lads who want to ask the questions, who want to ask the follow-up questions, can't. They're controlled, and they're very heavily controlled in terms of the questions they can ask and how they're asking follow-ups, and therefore Bruce is getting an easy ride. And so it's down to us. The only way as fans we have to vent our spleen is via channels like this and social media. And then that gives Bruce the easy thing to bat away, say that it's all keyboard warriors and people on the internet and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, where else can we express it?
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, it wouldn't be keyboard warriors if people were chucking cabbages at you every time you stuck your head out the dugout, you knacker. Christ.
Brilliant. Mark Byers, he says, really interesting to hear Malcolm say last night that he thinks Shelvey is deliberately making Willock look bad. Now, I know you guys haven't had much of a chance in the past to come to me pre-match. We tend to meet after the match. When you were living here as well, Mitch, would catch up afterwards, maybe he's in the Bodega or whatever. But the pre-match talkings that I've done with Malcolm for many years now, this isn't the first time Malcolm said this about Shelvey. And to back up his theory, he's had experience as a player and as a manager where an old professional has deliberately made a player look bad because he doesn't like him or he sees him as a threat. And Malcolm said last night he believes that Shelvey's now doing that with Willock. And I've got to be honest, I'm going to have to start watching it now because if Willock plays against Spurs, I'll deliberately, and Shelvey's alongside him, then I'll have to watch this. But the last time I watched it, he was right. He was on the money. Shelvey was deliberately making a player look bad. And it's one of those situations where, Malcolm, as I say, Steve, he's an ex-pro. He knows what he's talking about.
Of course he does. And even the little bit that we know that when we watch and you see passes and you're thinking, why has he played that short ball? Or why has he bypassed the player? It's sometimes it's bypassing the player that I find more annoying when a player's in a really good position and he bypasses him and plays the ball, or he hit the ball and it makes the player look an idiot because he's hit it so far. But the expectation of him and the people around him is that player's going to get to that ball. And I understand exactly and entirely where Malcolm's coming from that, and it's quite scary. There's from what we're hearing, that there are a number of players who are now questioning Shelvey, now questioning the way that he's supporting the manager against his teammates, and the way that he's reacting. There's lots of little sort of tales like that coming our way that not just things are not all right on the playing front or on the selection front, but actually within the squad itself, there are divides. It's not just a dispute over the manager and the way that he's got them playing, but actually who he's playing. That's come into it now. The relationship that the manager's got with certain players, but not with others, and how those players, because they feel as though they're an automatic on the team sheet, they have the right to then back the manager and slag off their teammates. And that's the sort of bother that's being created. It's not just this. Say, let's say, for example, it's not just the fact that Andy Carroll's sitting on the bench constantly shaking his head because something's not gone right and he feels as though he should be on there doing better. It's not that sort of body language. I can get away with that. I understand entirely where Andy Carroll's come from. I understand entirely where Dwight Gale's come from. Especially Andy, who's not coming on until 30 seconds from the end. And things like that, where you've got absolutely there's nothing you can do, and there's no input you can have into a game, and there's nothing that's there for you. But to have players that are now openly, going, because we know that he doesn't talk to the long staff. He's got this thing about Anderson that he's not prepared to blood him. And I look at the Arsenal team, and I look at Willock, for example. Willock's 21-year-old, and he's almost been an established Arsenal player for the last couple of seasons. He's been England under-21s. I know he's even managed to make it into the England squad at times. I'm not too sure, but he's certainly an established player in terms of a squad player at Arsenal, who they like and they're respected. But you look at other Arsenal players, other youngsters. I look at that kid Smith Rowe, and you're thinking, where's he come from? Why is he suddenly the flavour of the season? Why is everybody raving about him? And he's got himself into young England under-21s, and he's played through, and they're giving him an opportunity. Yet we've got the Longstaffs who are not getting a chance. We've got unless you're going to give these lads a chance, they're never ever going to make the team. And we've seen it. There was an article in the paper just this week about the lads around the 94-95 season that never ever got a chance. Never got a look in at Newcastle United, and were moved on. And I think we did it on the retro show the other night, where I mentioned the fact that I think from the 2016-17 season, there was 8 players in a particular game that we looked at that could have played on Saturday night in the first team. But when you looked at the reserve and the juniors of that exactly same year, there's not a single one of those players out of either of those squads at St James's Park now.
Yeah.
And that for me is like, what's that saying about what's going on further down the club? What's that saying about the academy? What's it saying about the under-23s? What's it saying about our squad management, the way that we're looking after players, the way that we're developing players? It's saying that we haven't got a plan. It's saying that we're paying lip service. We're treating it as a joke, and we're concentrating on what's basically 17 out of a squad of 25.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. Lots of comments coming in. Bruce is about to lose Ashley 150 million off the value of the club, and Ashley still somehow likes him. I don't even think it's that now, Mitch. I don't even think he cares. We've said this before. He's washed his hands of the club. He believes that arbitration will be sorted in favour of this takeover, and he'll be out the door, doesn't he?
Well, he's still over here in the UAE, cutting deals with Sun and Sand Sports. You know, that's the bottom line. That's what he cares about most, is running that big new warehouse facility in Riyadh. You know, and that's where his focus is at the minute. My understanding, you know, the irony of the Premier League kicking up a fuss about shadow directors and all this, is my understanding is the person making the decisions in Newcastle United is Justin Barnes, Mike Ashley's lawyer. And he's not named as a responsible individual anywhere at Company's House for Newcastle United. Thank you very much. Certainly wasn't a director approved or appointed by the Premier League. Some interesting bits and bobs, you know, creeping out again about connections and ties and who knows who and who interacts with who. And then when we found out that basically Bruce is still blanking the Longstaffs on the training pitch and isn't even giving Elliot Anderson a look at, when some of the senior pros are saying, hey, these guys are pulling up trees, you should have these involved around the first team. Just tells you everything you need to know. It's a shambles. We're going to lose another generation of young footballers, and we do this every now and again.
And a generation of fans, Mitch.
We never seem to have a cohesive plan about what to do with talented youngsters. I watch other teams putting 18, 19-year-olds on the bench and they bring them on, and they look fantastic and they look comfortable. They get 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and they're integrated into the first team. And some of them then go on to become regular first teamers. We've never done that. It just never seems to have happened for us, except when it's been out of necessity. We ended up getting Stephen Taylor and Shola Amiobi, to name 2 names, brought into our teams, mainly because they were blooded during the periods of absolute injury crises, and the managers at the time had no choice but to stick them in. You know, we were talking about what was said on the retro show. We were talking about that thumping we got at home off Birmingham in the FA Cup, and the most senior defender in that 11 was Stephen Taylor. And that was when he was, he'd been blooded because Roda was running out of bodies. And he had to play him. He had no choice. And so that's the only way we seem to bring players through is when the manager's got no choice. Well, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And what a difference that little bit of... Christ, we've got nothing to lose. And I'd rather have a young kid who has nothing to use, who's told, go on, there's no pressure on you. Go and do what you can do and show us what you can do. Give us 20 minutes of your very best. Let's see what happens. And I'd rather go down swinging like that than go down stale, asinine, clueless, with a formation that nobody understands, and with half the players wanting away, and the ones that want to stay wanting rid of one of them because he's up the manager's backside.
I mean, we've got a situation at the academy where the head of the academy's wife is suing the club on behalf of our son because he was injured, and now we've got the academy. That academy director's not there anymore. He's disappeared, and we've got Steve Harper, who seems to have moved away from the first team, back down into the under-23s, which is surprising.
Yeah, that's weird. That is weird.
I know, and I've no sort of understanding of why that's happening. There's very little. If in fact, I don't think there's any football being played at the academies. I don't think the academy teams are playing because of their age. So that we've only got the under-23s, and it's only recently that we've started to have under-23 games that seem to be sort of back with any. And even then, those games, there doesn't seem to be like a league. And I know we're bottom of the league, aren't we? Anyway, in the under-23s, so that tells you an awful lot about what's
2-2
going
draw
on.
Today, Steve. Tom Allen got 2.
Oh, great, excellent.
Against Fulham. I mean, it's a result anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wonder if it's going to end up where we need a 2-2 draw at the end of the season. Maybe those youngsters could get with a 2-2 draw. Maybe that's what we're looking at. Maybe that's why we blooded them today.
Aye.
But it is. There's so much wrong at the club, and it's a great club. It's our club. Because we've slept and drank this football club all our life. We feel as though it's part of it, and it's being destroyed. It's being taken from us. It's not even a scab to pick at anymore, is it? It's 10 times worse than that, and it just breaks your heart at times when you look, and that's why we're so passionate, and that's why we don't want it to happen, and that's why we're getting angry at Steve Bruce because he's allowing it to happen. That's why we're getting angry at Mike Ashley because he's allowing it to happen again. Third time in 5 years or whatever it is, and it's not that, but you know what I mean.
If he takes us down this season, he's going to be personally responsible for half of the relegations we've had from the top flight.
Yeah.
What a brilliant 14-year, 10-year of ownership. Absolute dick.
Unbelievable, isn't it? You could never have foreseen him when he came in. I remember being over the moon when Mike Ashley arrived at the club and cheering him because Dougie and Freddie had essentially sullied all the work that Sir John had done. They dragged the club through the whole News of the World expose, etc. And it just became a bit of a nightmare. And then obviously the certain deals went wrong, and Michael Owen deal was the one that pushed us over the edge financially. Club was hemorrhaging money. And of course, Abramovich coming in at Chelsea meant that, as Sir John Hall said, we couldn't compete. So they got out. Typical though, that there's a little bit of shenanigans went on, and the fact that they didn't do due diligence, Mike Ashley's people didn't do due diligence, meant that he ended up copping for an £80 million debt when he bought the club. So it's been a nightmare from the start, hasn't it? Really, for Mike Ashley, he's been playing catch up from the start, and that's why he's always been very, very frugal with his cash.
Yeah, but when he turned around and got rid of Allardyce, because you immediately thought, this guy knows what he's doing here. This guy's switched on. He's realised Allardyce isn't going to get his teams to where he wants it to be. He's not going to lead the club the way he wants it. He's not going to have the fun, and he's not having the fun watching an Allardyce team. He's like the rest of us. So at that point, we were very much behind Mike Ashley in terms of what he was trying to do. It was that decision that he made to bring people over the top of Kevin Keegan. We could argue, I suppose, that bringing Keegan in was a bad move. We'll never ever know. We're probably, the jury's out certainly on that one, because it never got to the point where we could turn around and say, the results were so bad that it made it wrong. What was wrong, in my eyes, was when he brought Dennis Wise and the rest of them above Kevin as directors of football, and people interfering in contradicting who Kevin wanted and making signings over the top of his head. And once you start to do that, when you haven't got the proper structure in place, and when you haven't got a plan that everybody's bought into, where the manager or the coach or whatever you want to call him understands how the club is going to operate and how the decisions are going to be made and who's going to be, and even then, there has to be a buy-in from, whether it's the director of football, and it's a phrase that I hate. I prefer that. Mitch and I have spoken, and we've spoken as well, Steve, about sporting director rather than a director of football. And a sporting director gives you everything right from top to bottom. The style of play that the club is going to play, and then you find the cogs to fit into that style, and it's right the way through the club. The ethos of the club has changed. The director of football doesn't sort out the ethos of the club. He basically goes out and buys players and tells the manager how he's bought. That's the subtle difference between the two roles. If you want, we could dig in and talk about a sporting director and what else it could bring if we wanted, but we don't need the one here. But that was the nub of it all. That upset Kevin. That upset the fans because he was upsetting a hero. We stood there on outside the ground for the whole game. We protested. And from that moment on, that weekend was the week after, the midweek. I think it was the Monday night, wasn't it, Mitch? That was the birth of NUFC.
Aye.
And we had the meeting, and we all called by True Faith, called by Michael Martin and Mark Jensen, and everybody piled in, and everybody had their full penneth worth, and it was really, really well structured, well put together. People volunteered to do things. People said that they wanted to step forward a little bit stronger, and then said, if you want to, we'll hold another meeting next week and we'll try and put some meat to the bone of everything. Those two lads went off with a few of their pals and worked on it, and when we all got back together, and then it was, right, well, this is where we could lead to. And from that moment onwards, it looked as though the fans were together. It looked as though the fans were unified, and there was a battle that we had to have with Mike Ashley. And I think it was only a couple of weeks after that where there was an article on the paper where Mike turned around and said, I think it was a Sunday Sun after one of the games, well, that's it. I'm not having this. I'm finished with it. The club's for sale. I'm out. And that was when we heard that he had tried to flip it to the Chinese for 200 million. And of course, that was it. From that was when it started to come out that he hadn't done due diligence, that there was this debt, that he wasn't going to prepare to pay this, blah, blah, blah. And then it was just lock up the doors and just ignore the fans from that moment onwards. And that was when we all piled in and we found out that they had fans liaison meetings, and we all walked up to St James's Park on a Monday night, I think it was. And there was about 12 or 15 of us, and we gate crashed the fans liaison meeting. And then from that moment onwards, Derek Lambias was the man with the red face, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah. With his finger in my chest, that was quite amusing.
Yes, exactly. That's the way it's been for the last 13 years. We've been at the coalface. We've done all of this. We've seen everything. You name it, we've had it at Newcastle over the last 13 years, and the only steady thing has been it's still the same owner. The last year, Steve, has been the time when it's been our biggest chance for him to go, because that was the deal that he wanted. That he finally had a deal that he felt as though suited him at the price, and I think that's the key, isn't it? It was at a price that he was willing to take, and
well, that's the argument I've had regularly over the last 10 years when people say to me he's not a willing seller. He is a willing seller. He's just a very difficult seller, and he'll only do it on his terms. And the only people he's ever sat down and talked seriously with were the ones that initially came up and said, okay, we'll do that. And then he sees how they respond to the reality of the situation when, for example, with the Gagliardi Canadian deal, suddenly the agreed price then went up because you need to buy the debt office as well.
Yeah,
and that was after they'd agreed the price and they were sitting down and properly talking. That was why he was happy to speak to Ben Zayed, because he believed he was going to get a price that he was happy with.
Yeah, the whole Ashley thing as well.
You know, it's all about, I'm going to sell this on my terms. If you look at what he does in his businesses elsewhere, he buys on his terms at the bottom end, and he sells rarely. But when he does sell, he sells on his terms. And that's what somebody we've worked closely with a couple of times has said to both me and Steve, that, you know, people think they can make a deal with Ashley, and you've got to know how to deal with Ashley when he's the seller, and he's a different beast when he's the seller than when he's buying some failing sportswear brand off you. If you've sold a failing sportswear brand to Ashley, don't think you're going to buy something off him just as easily, because you ain't, mate. Yeah. And the guy that was behind Benzaya Group's bid initially found that out to his personal cost.
I genuinely felt as well, I mean, the media turned the fans' opinions by, you know, turning the focus on Mike Ashley wearing the replica shirt. There seemed to be a lot of, you know, hatred towards him wearing that shirt, if you remember, and he shouldn't be like that with the fans, etc. And I've got a photograph of Mike Ashley, as I know hundreds of other people have, you know, from that day at Wigan alone. He probably did, you know, maybe he's 50 pre-match, 50 half-time, 50 after the match. So, you know, he was mobbed, really, and he was surrounded by security in Newcastle tops. But it was when he went to Arsenal at the old Highbury and stood and drank a pint of lager and necked it back in record time, it has to be said, Mitch. I mean, it was applaudable. But the fact he was in the director's box representing our football club, it really gave the press something to hound him with. And he never really liked that. So somebody's just said as well, the fact that you know, the Keegan situation, you mentioned it as well, Steve. The Keegan situation, there it is. Train's son. He's never forgiven our reaction to the way that he treated Keegan. Plus the media getting on him like that, it started to spiral out of control from that moment. And that was, you were involved in a motive character like Keegan, you're going to incur the wrath of the supporters if you treat him badly.
Just got so entrenched, and that was what Steve and I found when we eventually sort of got the shutters lifted a little bit and got the opportunity to sit with Lambias and sit and chew the fat with him over, you know, ongoing relegations, etc. But what was that? Ongoing relegations, etc. And it got so entrenched that when the club tried to do something that was actually positive, they got shit for it anyway.
Yeah.
And it became so absolutely entrenched about it all that we lost so much trust, and that's never come back. We're wary of anything that Ashley does still as a fan base, but equally he's wary of anything that the fans do. And it's a non-function. It's a totally dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah.
And it's not repairable. But unfortunately, he's not of a mindset that he's happy to lose £100 million. So it became an arranged marriage.
Yeah. At certain times, it was manageable. It could be managed. When you were having the success on the pitch, when you were, you know, when you got through the angst of relegation, and then you had Chris Hughton bringing us back, but then he goes and does something silly by getting rid of Chris after a 5-1 win against Sunderland, you know, and thinking, his logic in changing managers. Somebody advised him to do that, and he felt as though that by bringing someone in, he could take that squad to the next level, and maybe he felt as though that Chris couldn't, but he never gave it the opportunity, and he never talked about it. He just went ahead and did it, and again that caused. I mean, I remember being at Pardew's first game. I think it was the West Ham match. I think I think I forget. Did we beat them 3-0 or 3-2? I can't remember the score, but I remember from that point onwards, just thinking, I'm like Paul Dewey, just won a game, but I'm like because I didn't like the way that Chris Hughton was treated, So again, that became an issue. The stories that came out about the way that Jonas Gutierrez was treated, the stories that came out about players who were injured who were just forgotten about, the situation with Peter Beardsley, you name it. There just seems to be one crisis after another that the club was just riling and rolling through, and there was never an opportunity for them to like redeem themselves. They weren't listening to anybody. They would listen but not take on board anything that was said. It's a strange situation, and even the people who are running the football club on his behalf, fine well that they're not even the custodians of it. They're basically the bag carriers, and they're just a message comes through and they just pass the message up the line, and that's or down the line. It's just like sort of they're just there to answer the phone, and it's just. It's not the way that a football club should be run. It's not the way that an organisation that's turning over, £100 million a year should be operating in such a ridiculous way. But we've had 13 years of it because it's the way that Mike Ashley's just decided to take it out on with,
Yeah, I do want to focus a little bit on David Reed. He comes on to the 5-minute rant quite a bit. And David, I do see your questions, but the way this show tends to work is we just go with the flow. But I do like to try and involve you all in the chat at some point. And David always remains positive. He comes on, he always writes his points down, very eloquent on the 5-minute rant. Why don't we stop whinging and get behind the team? Things will change in the summer. I've said it for ages. Trust me, it's a fight to the end and we'll win it. A couple of these other posts before, which I'll probably not be able to find now because the posts come in quite thick and fast, was about Fulham. And he believes, Mitch, that, Fulham aren't going to get the points they need. And he thinks we're worried too much. Does he have a point? Can you see the alternative view? Are you, can you understand people still being optimistic despite what we're seeing on the pitch at the minute?
I would far rather have control of the situation in our own hands, which we still do. However, I'm not seeing anything from our team that tells me that we could control a pass, let alone this situation. And that's my concern. I get getting behind the team. And you know what? If we had a ground full of fans, we would be getting behind the team, I'm quite sure. Particularly our away fan base. There's no better than being amongst our away fans. Because 90 minutes non-stop, they give our lads their backing. No matter what the situation. And right now, because we've all been in it before, we've all been in away crowds and relegation dog fights, where we've been there in the thick of it with all our mates, supporting the team, and there's no better feeling than being in those trenches, supporting the lads on the pitch. This is the problem now. We're not there. Mm-hmm. We're not there. And we can sit and wax lyrical on social media about, come on, lads, play up the boys. It's very difficult to do it in the same way without that physical vocal expression to vent in the crowd that says to those players, we are with you. I think what is significant for me is, again, if you look at the platforms where people can vent their spleen, and most of them are social media at the moment, I don't see much, if anything, directed to any of the players other than Joe Linton.
Yeah.
The majority of the players, I don't think are getting stick, from what I can see.
It's too easy.
And you're right, it is too easy. And therefore, I think if we weren't getting behind the team, more of our players will be getting stick at the weekend. Maybe it's Kraft as well. But then again, he's more interested in playing for Sweden than he is for Newcastle United. So
David says being negative on social media won't help the cause. David, it's the only place where people can vent their spleen, mate. And like Mitch is saying, from our respect,
it doesn't help the cause.
It doesn't. No.
But we've got no other way to express it either. And that's the dilemma we have at the moment. We don't have outlets to express where we're at in the same way. We don't really have the same ways to express the support.
Whether we like it or not, I can see Steve's keen to get in on this as well, but whether we like it or not, we are all in some way going through some kind of mental battle through the pandemic, mainly because we're all being denied our natural liberties in the UK at the moment, compared to Mitch, who's got slightly better out there. But when he was under lockdown, was a lot stricter. But me and you, Steve, we're still, 12 months on. We're still in the midst of this pandemic with a third wave on its way, with with no real sign, I don't think, of us coming out of this till probably next year properly. And the football's supposed to be an escape which gives us a bit of enjoyment, and it's actually not. It's compounded the misery, and it's actually affected our mental health. And I don't care who you are and what you're saying, you might feel you're mentally strong, because I feel like I'm mentally strong. But believe you me, I have my moments, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, and I'm very lucky, I count myself very lucky that I can pick the phone up to you, Steve, or I can pick the phone up to Mitch, or Stu Penman, or Spenny when he's had trouble, Martin's had bother. We built this community, and it wasn't a plan, it just came about because of me saying, do you want to do a podcast? And here we are 12 months later, we've got nearly 700 watching again tonight. And we've got a lot of people who are all tuned into us because we've given them something and they're giving us something back. And it's lovely. But we're all suffering mentally at some point in time. And Newcastle's supposed to be a happy escapism from that. But it doesn't, Steve. It compounds the misery.
No. I mean, this time last week, when we asked for what we predicted scores line would be, I said I thought we'd win 2-0. Remember?
Yeah.
And I just remember your eyes just rolling as if to say, whoa. I think you thought I was going to go for a draw or something like that. But I genuinely thought that the performance we would put in would shock us in a positive way. I thought this was the opportunity for the manager to take this team by the scruff of its neck. And I thought that he'd have worked on it all week. And I thought he'd have the players 110% on side, with a style of football and a tactic that would have against a team that was struggling alongside at the bottom of the league, and everything he'd spoken about in midweek. And then I watched the game and I saw nothing of what I expected. And to David, I would say, yeah, I'll probably be a fool, and I'll probably say exactly the same when it comes to Tottenham, because I'll convince myself that, you know what, Tottenham are there for the beating because they never ever play well at St James's Park, and so it'll go on, and then we'll get done, but then I'm another game away, I'm another game down, and as Mitch says, we're relying on Fulham falling by the wayside, and there's every chance that they will fall by the wayside, but that's. I cannot. You see this. You see this some seasons where teams go on a run and they go on that run a bit too early, and they might have peaked. Yes. They might have shot that bolt. They might be on way out the. They might be on their way out the back door of the club while we're putting another 50p in the peep show. You just don't know. Yeah, or we might be in a situation when Newcastle United go on a run, Fulham go on a run, Brighton go on a run, and Southampton get to the cup final and fall like a stone.
Oh, yes.
That might happen. We've seen that happen. But I cannot, because of the gap, because of the points differential, because of that, I cannot honestly hang me hat on that and say, oh, that's what's going to happen, or that. It's a figment, isn't it? It's like it's not a reality until it actually happens, and there's more of a chance of us not picking up the points and Fulham just getting ahead of it. That's the worrying thing. That's the thing, and we can have all the faith in the world. And let's face it, none of us want to get relegated.
No.
We don't want relegation. And It's not us that are going to relegate either. It's the 11 on the pitch and it's the coaching team. That's what's going to relegate. It's the lack of points. It's the fact that we've only picked up, 8 points out of a possible, 60 or whatever. I don't know.
Ironic, given that our manager bangs on about points accumulation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know what the lad's saying, and I know we can all remain positive, but there reaches a point where positivity among the fans isn't gonna get with a point.
Hang on a minute. It's not that long ago we were getting slammed for being positive. We were almost apologising for positivity.
We've been through a roller coaster ride, lads, this last 12 months, mate. But it's been a laugh. It's been a laugh. It has. It has been a laugh. Do you know what I mean? Right. Look, as you know, the regular watchers of the show, we do have our regular segments. Obviously, no Toon Statue this week because Newcastle, of course, don't have a game. But it is Mitch's section first. It is Toon Lookalikey. As always.
This one really tilled me fancy. This one.
Mitch always finds the best ones. Again, I laughed out loud. I mean, when you see these things, you do. But we'll go.
Just that hint of blue. I reckon. Do you know what? I reckon he should blue up at the weekend and come on the pitch like that.
Hey, Andy is up for anything, by the way. When we saw his beard, he wasn't afraid to come out and wear that beard, was he? But he's definitely a leader of fashion and stuff. He's never a follower.
Is that how he's going to have to get noticed, is it?
Was
that one of the kids who did that on the night time to him when he was playing dressy up like all dads have to do?
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Fantastic.
What was that film called again, by the way?
Avatar.
Multi-billion-pound film or something, wasn't it? But yeah. And who helped you with that one this week, Mitch?
John Akutek.
John Akutek, Take a Bow, Son. That's an absolute belter. Great stuff. That is our Toon Lookalikey this week. And I'm not going to make anyone wait too much longer for... I know everybody loves this one. I'll play the music twice because I've seen people in the chat already saying, I can't wait for Troll of the Week.
Bob.
This really was very easy this week because it was straight after the show that Troll of the Week made his comment. Absolute belter. And it was on a strange place. It was actually on our YouTube comments. But here you go again. Yep. Troll of the Week. And he's been a bit active today as well, it has to be said. But I picked out last week's comment. William Kane. BZG. What a cretin you are, Rafe. Now, it's obviously the way that I pronounced it last week. So maybe I should be saying BZG. Is that right, lads? Is it BZG or BZG?
Well, technically, out here, they use lots of American pronunciations for all sorts. I still can't get used to my daughter coming out telling us she's gonna put something in the trash and things like that. Sort of a little bit like, ooh.
I mean, for all William knows, I could be going for some kind of American role in a gangster film or something.
You could be.
So yeah,
you need a fedora though.
William Kane, BZG, what a cretin you are, Rafe. He is our Troll of the Week. Thanks a lot, Liam. John Akutek and a few earlier on in the chat were saying that people are deliberately trolling us now. I mean, it doesn't take much effort. Does it? Joe Walker says, I'm so uneducated, please don't ever write a book. Dear God. What an absolute belter. I've got to ask you about the days off. You alluded to it at the start of the show, Steve, when you said you were surprised I hadn't given you the weekend off. But I think that was the biggest headline, wasn't it? Craig Hope announcing the fact that the players were having 6 days out of 9 off.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got to admire Craig, haven't you? I mean, he's a supporter, and B, he's been banned from the ground for telling the truth. I mean, well done. A reporter telling the truth and gets banned for it. So yep, that in itself, he deserves the medal and the freedom of the city just for that. But I mean, to get a story of the fact that they've been given 6 days off. And I looked at .com, and I think I sent you the link, Steve. We've got hardly any players on international duty. It's not like we're down to the bare bones. It's not like we've got nobody in. And he would have just been working with a couple of juniors and some under 23s. I think there's only 4 of the first team away on duty, and you're thinking he could have been running post-mortems. He could have been checking out on the players, finding out exactly what they think the problem is. Formulating some ideas with his coach and staff. There's awful lot that could be working with set pieces and all sorts.
We know categorically he doesn't do any of that.
Well,
the only stats he's interested in is how far somebody's run. He doesn't look at any of the other stats. He's not interested in any of the other stats. Since Graham Jones has come in, the stats department have had to go on overtime because he's asking for stuff they've never been asked for 2 years.
But to combat it all, what we've ended up with a situation where on Wednesday we just got loads of photographs of 2 players running around the pitch and supposed to be training, and that was to imply that training, that the first team are back in training, and it was photographs of ASM and Wilson on grass running around, trotting around together, having a bit smile, a bit laugh, taking a few shots, and then naturally the certain papers pick up on it, and it's like Newcastle United players in training, so there's the implication that they're back, and then. What do we hear today, Mitch? We hear that, it's actually the players of their own volition who have come back.
Decided to come back, aye.
It's not the coaches, it's the players of their own volition who have turned up to do a little bit of running. Bearing in mind that ASM wasn't allowed to be training until probably Sunday anyway, because that was his weeks of quarantine after being out of the country. So that would have been up on the Monday, and then Him and Wilson have been out on the Tuesday doing a little bit of running and a little bit of exercise and getting fresh air and catching a few rays. But that's been about it. And it's so difficult now, isn't it, for the press, because they get given stories that they're then expected to present, and then they haven't. At the other side, you've got other pressmen who are not being given the stories. They're going away and they're finding stories, and the stories that they're finding are in total contradiction to what is officially being put out by the football club. It's a bit like the story that ASM was out the country, which was a deniable story, which was never denied. And we know of press lads who queried the football club and were told, no, everything that you're saying is true. Everything you're saying is true. And then when they write it, there's a counter story in another newspaper that's been given out that says absolute load of rubbish. And you go, what?
Well, no. Look, we know categorically that ASM's trip for his birthday wasn't sanctioned by the club, no matter what the club say. Right? And rightly or wrongly, I got a bit of stick because I talked about it, like I was criticising ASM. Not at all, not a criticism of ASM at all. The lad's injured. If he wants to go home to celebrate his birthday at home, do it. If everybody's happy with you doing it, you go and do that. That's totally fine. If it boosts your morale, if it brings you back when you're fully fit, happier, because while I was injured, I was able to go home and have my birthday celebration with my mates, and then I came back and I was ready to go and I was refreshed and I was going to come back and help the fight against relegation, etc. It was more a tackle at the club. The fact that the lack of leadership in that club from top to bottom meant he did it on his own without the club's permission, and then realised when he got to France he needed the elite sportsman's forms to get back into the country without having to do full quarantine and this, that, and the other. And then the club had to scramble to help him out with that because he just hadn't thought it through, which is like what most professional footballers with a bit of money in their back pocket do. They do shit without thinking about it because you've got to treat them like schoolboys. Because that's what it is. You're dealing with a rich schoolboy.
especially if you're travelling back with your agent, who is trying to claim that he's some sort of on some sort of sportsman's certificate, and you're also bringing your dad back. You know,
and it's like you've obviously got no clue of the paperwork that you needed to do that trip. You just thought, I can hire a plane and go home for a few days. I'm just going to go and do it. And the manager didn't know he was doing it, and the managing director of the club didn't know he was doing it. And I don't care what the club say, I know categorically. You know, Steve, categorically. And some of the journalists know categorically because they've all seen the same evidence that the club had no clue. And it wasn't a slight on ASM at all. And it's great to see him back running in the training ground when everybody's allegedly got time off training and what have you. And that's great. That's good to see. Same with Wilson. You know, I can't wait to see that big daft smile on a football pitch again, because that'll give you a little bit of hope back. But then the journalists cannot win, because some of the journalists at the minute seem to be getting stick off the fans again because you're not asking the hard questions. They can't ask a question, let alone a hard one.
Because it's all on Zoom.
So, you know, so they're having to do twice the work to get half the information sometimes. And then they've got no way to come back or no pushback at the club when the club go into denial over something that was very easily managed if they'd just been smart about it. And some of these things escalate because the club put their head in the sand, don't respond, go into denial mode. No, everything's fine, nothing to see here. You know, the Iraqi information officer comes wandering out the gates at St James's Park saying, nothing to see here, everything's fine. When everybody and that dog knows it's wrong because the dressing room's leaking like a sieve because there's more moles than Manic Bloody Minor, and it's just a mess, and it's the way the club seem to be handling everything at the minute, and it's not helping the mood off the pitch. I'm sure it's not helping the mood on the pitch, and we've got a manager who seems to now be comfortably spending his time in Cheshire as much as possible, and giving the players the day off to say thank you for whatever. I bet you not see a picture of John Joe Shelvey on that training pitch during the time he's got off.
No, of course you won't. Of course you won't. Loads of comments.
He'll be at home with his personal chef.
Loads of comments coming in. Keep them coming in before the end of the show. A lot of people. Dave Reed was asking about Kraft. Robert Goodinson. Difference with Kraft is nobody cares what he does. It's caused a lot of problems. These trips away. COVID, of course, has played its part. We're only getting half a story.
I mean, this is the nonsense of the European calendar, sticking 3 games in an international weekend during COVID, when there's all sorts of travel restrictions.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of stupid messes going on at the minute, because everybody just is starting to go into this every man for himself mode. So UEFA and FIFA are wanting 3 games played on an international weekend. So Kraft's got a choice. Does he book an 8 a.m. flight out to Newcastle to go and join Sweden, which he knows he can't make coming back from Brighton? So he'll not go to Brighton instead. You know, that's just ridiculous. To have that player put in that position is ridiculous, really, at the end of the day. There's all sorts of nonsense going on at the minute, like that thing with the new restructure for the Champions League with the chess-style Swiss system, which is fantastic. Which, what a great way to... I've been campaigning for that to be brought in for the FA Cup for years, me. What a fantastic way to sort games out, and I'm quite happy to explain it to anybody who needs it explained. Because, by the way, you'll need it explained. It's an absolute hot mess of a way to work something out in football. It might work for chess, but it certainly doesn't work for football unless you're trying to keep all the biggest portions of the pie to yourself.
Steve, a lot of people were talking about Chris Wilder. Go on if you've got something else to say.
I'm trying to get my head around a league like they have in Scotland, where after 3/4 of the league, it splits into 2. I mean, I'm still trying to get my head around that, and it's been happening for years. So God knows what sort of system that they're going to bring in for the UEFA.
You're not seeing it, Steve. It's great, right? You take your teams that are entered and you get divided into pots like seeds, right? And you're guaranteed 10 games. So a seed 1 team will get 2 games against seed 1 teams, 3 games against seed 2, seed 3 teams, and 2 games against 2 seed 4 teams. So you play 10 games in total. Once those, and there's no home and away, they're just the games that come out as they are, one leg, and then at the end, when everybody's played their 10 games, you have a league of table of 32. Your top 8 automatically go forward to the round of 16 and qualify for the competition next year.
What?
Yes. 9 to 24 play off in a playoff system to see who are the remaining 8 that join those 8 in the round of 16. And that's how the round of 16 is decided.
Right.
And it's designed to get more games between the big teams in the group stages. So you'll get more Barcelona, Juventus, you'll get more Man United, Inter Milan, you'll get more of those. Because as we know from the Amazon football metrics that they have, they're the games people watch exponentially more. So that's how they justify the increase in television money for the Champions League. But the biggest sweetener is that your top 8 automatically qualify for the Champions League the next season.
Dear me.
Wow.
And it is, honestly, if you go into the depths of how it works, it is the most complicated, convoluted way of drawing teams that is ultimately designed to allow the rich to get richer and screw everybody else.
Crazy.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. Chris Wilder. A lot of people in the chat asking about him, Steve. Again, it's another name that won't go away. The bookmakers do what the bookmakers do. They've compiled a list of names. Sadly, I'm not on there after putting myself forward, but I did give it a go. But Chris Wilder, I mean, scratching my head at that one, I really am. Unless, you're talking about championship manager, I just don't see him at Newcastle.
No, nor do I, perfectly honest. Unless you're already relegated and you're looking for a regroup and the person who you originally had in mind for next season doesn't want the job, or that you feel as though the takeover's not happening, or something like that. Chris Wilder doesn't, yes, he did very well at Sheffield United. He took them from the lower reaches of League One, and he got them promoted, then he got them steadied in the Championship, then he got them promoted, and then he steadied them in the Premier League. His downfall this season has been that he never changed, and the goal scorers that he got in cannot score goals. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And again, he's also the sort of bloke who wants complete control and complete autonomy over the decision making, and that's not something you're ever going to get at Newcastle. In fact, you're going to get less than of the opportunity than you are with the Saudi-backed or the Saudi-owned Sheffield United, which is the reason why he left in the first place. Something went on there, something that he wasn't happy with, and even then, there's a messiness, isn't there, about how he's left. There's now claims that he said he would walk, because it's ultimately they are going to get relegated, and then he came crying out for that strange figure of £4 million for to leave. It's strange how it's always £4 million, isn't it? That gets bandied around as a payoff. It's just yet another name in the frame. It's just that's all it is. It's something for the media and something for mainly the gambling companies to throw into the mix, Steve, and to keep Newcastle fans boiling on those timelines and on topics like that, and throw that good money after bad. It annoys me, and it's a bit like the whole gambling thing with football annoys me. And some of the racist abuse I think that some of the players have been getting of late, when clubs have been beaten, there's got to be a tie-in with some of that racist abuse and abuse that footballers have been getting, because it always seems to hand and tie in with a defeat. When a club gets beat because somebody's lost some money on a particular game, the abuse starts to fly, and it's becoming more and more prevalent as people are locked in and people are desperate for money and they're gambling away their lives, gambling away what little money they've got, and they take it out on a Marcus Rashford or a Paul Pogba or whoever, a Wilfried Zaha, and it just seems to be happening more and more and more. And I'm amazed at that correlation between people who are gambling and people who are losing and then having a go at players. There's, to me, there's such a connection there, but nobody's willing to stand up and say that. I'm not hearing any of the press people trying to put a link to it, and it just seems to be being pushed under the carpet. And when I hear names being bandied around at Newcastle on who could come in as manager, I feel yet again that it's just the gambling companies just pushing Newcastle fans and trying to take their money off them.
What's your thoughts on it, Mitch?
The only reason I could see Wilder being brought in would be on a wing and a prayer that he could generate something that he generated in Sheffield United last season, rather than this, or they're genuinely preparing to try and get one back up out the Championship. One or the other. Though, to be fair, I certainly think you would bring more to the table than Bruce at the moment. I don't think we'd do any worse. I think could appoint that cat that's typing on the bloody computer to pick the team, and I don't think we'd do much worse. So that's the challenge we've got at the minute.
Yeah,
it's dealing with Bruce and his randomness or his ego or lack of it or whatever's actually going on that isn't allowing the dressing room and the manager to come together. We had hopes that the stick and plaster of Graham Jones was going to bring it all together, and it looked like it might, but it obviously hasn't. And so, where do we go from here? And sometimes I do think, can we do any worse? And I'm not convinced we can. 2-20.
Yeah, well, I mean, do you think if we go down, Mitch, and Steve Bruce is still here, he'll be given the job to come back up, to bring us back up, because he's got a track record of doing that?
Depends if there's still a takeover on or not. I think if there's a takeover on for Ashley Still, he'll do absolutely nothing. We will be a club in stasis, and the manager will not be ejected. If, however, there is no way out for him, and he has to do something, that might be different. Because he has been shown to be motivated to do something about it before. Let's be honest, the money the club owes him is money that he cost himself by allowing him to get relegated previously. So he's shown he can, but is his will still there, bearing in mind that there's nobody at the tiller and with that seemingly endless ghost ship at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good way of describing it, isn't it, Steve? I mean, do you think Steve Bruce would be given an opportunity, if he was still here, to give Newcastle a run in the Championship?
I honestly think they would. I think they would just leave it as it was. If the situation at the football club remains as it is in terms of ownership, and we happen to go down, I think that they would not be prepared to then pay Steve Bruce off. I think they would be prepared to leave him in charge in the hope that he could bring them back up. And when it suited them, then make a change if they felt as though they needed something to push them on in the December when there's less to be paid. And then even then they would probably negotiate a payoff with him. That's just prime Ashley, isn't it? Like we said earlier, though, the situation isn't, and the confidence level. I know we've talked about it, but am I wrong in thinking that when Benitez took it down, when they brought Benitez in with what 10 games to go, 8 games to go, were we already in the bottom 3? And then and left him, and it was very much an upward climb. Certainly,
yes, I think we were.
It was similar. It was like, can you drag us out of this? We don't need to be dragged out of anything at the minute. We just need a couple of wins. We need the momentum of the football club to change. And I think there was a couple of weeks ago when I thought, I was thinking to myself, it's too late to get rid of the manager. But now hearing what's been going on in the dressing room and the attitude of the players, and the fact that we had players who actually openly were amazed that Bruce was still doing interviews after the game on Saturday night when they were getting on the bus, and were convinced that he had been sacked or that he would be sacked, and were surprised that he was doing the interviews. That tells me that there is something within that dressing room that's not right around him. And so there could be the bounce. If you changed him, there could be the bounce that gives you those 2-3 wins that you need out the last 9. And we could get a momentum and save our season.
On the back of the fact that we know that on at least 3 occasions in the last third of the season, there's a group of players have been to Lee Charnley to raise concerns. Not just once, not just twice, 3 times. And the third time, there was more players involved in it. And that tells me, like Steve's, you're right there, that if that's the feeling inside the dressing room, a managerial change might give with the dead cat bounce that we need.
Hence the line about go running back to Lee Charnley a couple of weeks ago as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
He knows what's going on. And he uses these words in the press to goad and to puff his chest out and to basically physically chest barge everybody the way he did in person with Matt Ritchie, when he's almost like, it's like we've heard that he behind the scenes he calls Rafa the mighty Rafa every time his name gets mentioned. That's somebody who really, really, really does need to have a little word with his ego.
Yeah, ego's a big thing with Steve Bruce. Yeah.
Please tell us he drives an absolutely massive Mercedes to make up for something else.
Will it not be just might not give lauders or something like what is it? Was it a lauder? Was it something like that? What was them cars they all used to drive in Russia?
Yeah, it would be
lauders.
Lauders, I was right. I'm not a car man, of course, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, look, I've got a question from Dodo Bird. Now, whenever I see Dodo Bird's name come up in the chat, I think, oh my God, what is he going to come out with? He's a great guy, though. Comes up with some usually good stuff for Malcolm and Gibbo. Tonight he says, "Hi Steve, could you ask Mitch, should the takeover happen and Newcastle then being the richest club in the world, is it inconceivable that the Saudis would move from St James's Park and build a mega super stadium central to other sporting facilities, training grounds, restaurants, cinemas, etc. Surely they wouldn't settle for second best. And what a showpiece that would be. Look at the new stadiums abroad now. They are unbelievable. They make St James's Park look like a farm building. St James's Park will be a super new home for the Falcons and a perfect venue for international rugby, as it has already proved. So not wasted. What do you think? Or am I just dreaming?" Dodo Bird.
Look, that's not a daft question. And if you dig through numerous times on podcasts and in various other places that Steve and I have written articles before, the conversations we've been having with people looking to buy Newcastle United, and that includes the Canadian group from 2014 onwards.
Yeah.
St James's Park is a real estate play with a football problem. And if you're talking about building a club that's challenging for the title, that's challenging for European honours, we wouldn't need, in the long term, this wouldn't be something that would happen overnight. It wouldn't be in the short-term plans. But in the long term, if we were seriously to do a Man City, right, we would probably need 80,000, because we could probably do that on a big night in Europe or a big day in the Premier League. And so to get that, we're not going to get that on the plot that is St James's Park. Even if you look at the plans that I did with John Henry, the Irish architect out here, that turned the pitch 90 degrees and increased the pitch of the stands to 70 degrees. And he got 77,000 on that plan, Steve?
Something like that, 72.
Something like that, wasn't it? 72 plus. And that's using the site at St James's Park, right? Realistically, to get what a modern stadium should be, we need a different site. And that different site, for me, the one I would go for would be Sir John Hall's vision, the one we're going into Leazes Park and using the area around there. And then you shrink St James's a little bit, and he's right, it would then become a multi-sport facility. Could be fantastic for the Falcons, could be fantastic for international rugby, for example, and more besides. Bring Gateshead Thunder into that, the league team and all. So, you know, it certainly would be an option. And you're right, modern facilities, we look at the stuff that Matthews Southwest did in the States. We looked at the plans that they had for, was it Dallas's new ground, Steve?
South Dallas, yeah.
Yeah, you know, the way they redeveloped a real downtrodden area of South Dallas to put in a fantastic stadium. Modern stadium should be a 24/7, 365 venue with food and beverage, with malls, with reasons to be there every day. Should, as well, if you really want to go to the next level, have conference facilities and housing, and it should be a real multi-layer real estate site. And that's why St James's Park doesn't work. Any kind of redevelopment in St James's Park, it's a real estate player with a football problem in the middle of it. If you look at, for example, we saw plans as well, again done by the same people, for what would have been a new Durham cricket ground, had they not had the rugs pulled from underneath them by the ECB. And again, that redeveloped Riverside had housing, had a Jumeirah Hotel in it with conferencing facilities. It had it had food and beverage on the Riverside. It had housing. It really was, again, it was a multi-use 365 24/7 venue. That's what they should be if you're designing them from scratch. And without moving Newcastle United from St James's Park for a full season, we can't do that with St James's Park and play in it.
Yeah,
there's no way to do it, and there's the problem with the Leazes Terrace, and although I've seen some fantastically clever ways to get around that. As a fan base, we would be left with a real heart dilemma. Do you want this fantastic new facility that could redevelop a part of the city and bring so much more to the region, or do you want to stick with St James's Park with all its faults? And it's a tough one.
It is tough, because it's an emotive one that pulls at the strings.
Absolutely, and again, that's why Sir John Hall's idea of just moving 400 yards up the road, for me, was the most elegant solution. Because you're technically still St James's Park, sort of. You could still call it St James's Park, and people would and it would still be a city centre ground. That's one of the unique things we have. You know, the whole cathedral on the hill analogy. The fact that we top the most pubs within a mile of the ground of anywhere by an absolute country mile. You know, it fits being the heartbeat of the city, and sticking it anywhere else. What brings the question: are you ripping some of the heart out of the city by doing that? Such as the relationship with the club and the city and the community. But and it's a fantastic question. One you can probably get I could sit and do full 2 hours on quite easily, because Steve and I have looked at this enough in the last 10 years. What do we do with St James's Park? What do we want? What do we need? We don't need that in the short term, but I'm telling you now, that 52,000 seats would be not enough going forward if we were transformed into one of the best clubs in Europe. It wouldn't be enough, and we'd have to have that hard decision about what do we do with the ground and where do we go from here. And the only way to make it work is with consultation. to reach it, because remember the furore when they wanted to make it the Sports Direct Arena, right? And how that absolutely put a knife through so many people's hearts. Okay, why? Because it wasn't consulted. Nobody was allowed to buy into the idea. It was done on the back of an international weekend like this, where they said, we've sacked the manager, we've changed the name of the ground as well. Boom. 2 weeks to let it settle down, and then there's the next home game. Instead, what Sir John did was clever. He went to the fan base and said, look, going forward in the future, this isn't enough for us. We deserve more than this. And this is what I propose to do. What do you all think about it? And he got people to buy in, and there would still be a percentage of the fans terribly resistant to it because it's so emotive. St James's Park's my home, and has been for over a century, and that's why it's so emotive. But the modern football world is so different now in terms of what you need to be commercially viable and successful. The people we should talk to is Arsenal fans about leaving Highbury and going to the new grounds. And financially, emotively, that must have been such a hard decision. But financially, they make £1 million a match day in normal circumstances. £1 million a match day. That doesn't half help the coffers, doesn't it? And I think that's the way we've got to try, and they're the debates we need as a fan base. And we need people on board with it, like the Trust, like all the guys that do the podcasts and things like that. If this was to go forward, we'd need as many voices as we could get together that gave input to those decisions to help either soften the blow for some people, to help them get their heads around that this isn't modern football anymore and we've got to do something about it. Or if what they're proposing is absolute rubbish, like moving within the boundaries of the city of Sunderland or something stupid like that, then it needs to be a big enough voice to say, whoa, what are you thinking about there?
You couldn't move it to Gateshead. I mean, John Hall, if you remember, he did that, but obviously years later I spoke to John Hall and he says, we never intended on moving to Gateshead. We were doing that to crack, to get a better deal with Newcastle City Council. He says
absolutely.
It was
just there's politics at play with city councils. And again, that was why some of us got involved with introducing people from the Canadian group to the city council. Steve and Bill and my dad sat down with a load of the guys and used all the contacts they had to introduce people. And there was lots of discussions around that going on before they even got involved with the direct bid, because they wanted to have the things in place that allowed them to have the conversations that said, anyway, we could maybe find a solution for the Leazes Terrace problem, and things like that, So it's how you do it, and and you're right. Again, it comes back to such an emotive thing. We're talking about moving home, and at the minute, this is monopoly money and pie in the sky. But it is a question that we would have to face somewhere down the line. I've got no doubt about it. If there was a Saudi takeover to happen, and we were going to end up with, we had a sort of a Man City-like explosion. It's a conversation we'd need to have.
Yeah, we also introduced them to Sir John Hall, we introduced to Peter Rath, John Woff, Malcolm Dix, because we knew that these are the people who had been through football ownership, had been through change. We knew that they have, in one respect, knew where the skeletons were buried at St James's Park in terms of finances, the pitfalls that they would get embroiled in if they wanted to buy the football club, which they did. Getting back to the ground itself, I think when it was mooted back in, when was it? Was it the mid 90s? Early 2000s, I think, when it was discussed, and that was that time, and then it got thrown out. I think that perhaps our age demographic were very anti the move, or a lot of us in our age demographic were, in terms of losing that connection with St James's Park. I wonder now, 20 odd years later, whether the age demographic of the fans, the younger fans, the fans who follow, FIFA, and they follow European football, and to see what's going on in other cities, to see Tottenham's immaculate stadium, to see new stadium developments at Juventus, to hear about Barcelona and Madrid doing their stadiums up. We hear about the San Siro getting demolished and a new stadium being built there. And I wonder whether the younger generation wouldn't have such a close affinity with St James's Park that perhaps some of the older generation would have. And that works into that whole having to have a dialogue and having to have that conversation with people who understand the younger generation and understand or have a different outlook on football and about nostalgia, etc.
There's no doubt in my mind that the younger generation of football support is now more fluid. The pattern I see here in the Middle East is people support players, not teams. Mm-hmm. So when Ronaldo moves from Real Madrid to Juventus, all of a sudden I get paranoid. I see so many black and white striped shirts sometimes. I met a colleague for a coffee in downtown to chew the fat over a couple of things through the week. And there was two little kids playing football in black and white shirts. And he gave us a nudge. He says, "Are they your lot?" I says, "No, they'll be Juventus." And rightly enough, they were Juventus shirts, And that's how support works. Yeah, but I see it with the sort of, talking to my mates with younger kids back home who are quite happy to, pop up wearing shirts from different clubs all over the place. It's not always just black and white and black and white and black and white now. And so, yeah, maybe there would be less resistance to a move from a younger fan base, but we need those consultations.
Yeah.
That's why we need to reach out, and as doddery old feckers like us, we need to reach out and get that opinion from the younger minds and say, well, what do you think? I've always been quite open to it personally, because there's a bigger picture that I've had the privilege to see in so many different ways. That whole sports direct arena thing. If that had been approached in a very different way, I think far more people would have been more open to the concept. It was just done in such a cack-handed, typically Mike Ashley way. It created a problem where there shouldn't have been one, and so I do think a little different to the generation of the football support that I'm from, and that's why it needs dialogue. It needs people who come in and from day one are prepared to be open and say to the fan base, come and talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the key. That's the key, and it depends on who owns it. David was asking, could I just explain what I was saying the other day? Yeah, I mean, when I was at the club as fan liaison officer, and that was 20 odd years ago now, the chief executive at the time, David Stonehouse, showed me the plans for development on the East Stand side, because obviously the big cock up came back in the 60s, of course, when they were going to rebuild the ground, and then there was a shortfall in money at the club and they couldn't develop it. The East Stand eventually got built and put up, and now it's out of kilter with the rest of the ground. So essentially there was talk in the 90s or late 90s and early 90s of building on the East Stand. The idea being then that they would extend the Gallagher, they would potentially knock the East Stand down, rebuild it and incorporate the old student accommodation behind the East Stand within the infrastructure of the new East Stand. The reason being that it's listed buildings. And listed buildings mean that the frontage would need to be used. But I saw the designs, and the designs were the doorways that were going into the student accommodation would actually be the doors into the turnstiles, but it would be incorporated into the stand. That was the way around it. The cost on that, though, was extreme. To have that done, to buy those buildings off the university and incorporate them into a new stand was the equivalent of building a new stadium. Yeah. That's
ironically,
wow.
Ironically, those buildings were then bought by a dentist who's just sold them to a Saudi investor.
Well, there you go. Right, it's getting on. It's 7:20 and we've all got things to do. I know some people would love us to do 3 hours. Maybe we will one day. You never know. But first of all, we have our final feature, which of course is Steve Hastie's. Tweet of the week, always interesting. I had to pick up on this. Now, NG, I've had a love-in with him. I've had fights with him. I've had some disappointing run-ins with him. But at the minute, we're friends. I know he likes to wind the fan base up. I did find this funny. And this, I mean, you guys can obviously relate to this because you get a lot of inboxes asking what's going on with the takeover. I'm sure you are the same as me. You answer them very politely. Unfortunately, NG does have a sense of humour. And sometimes he does get the same kind of inboxes as we do. People don't read his account properly. However, this one from Will. Hi, how do you know about Steve Bruce? He put out that Steve Bruce had been sacked. He put, Chris told me. Chris who? P. Bacon. Well connected around North East football. Might be before your time. Dear God. Sorry, honestly, Will, I really feel for you, mate, because we can all get sucked in. But NG, you haven't won Tweet of the Week because it's not my place to give it out. But I did have to say it, and I did tell him on Twitter, well done, mate. I did laugh at that. Now, I've always got to remember which order he's in, right? I think I've got it, Steve, because sometimes I end up putting the wrong one up. I've got it right this week. Hold on. Bang. This was one of the first ones that you sent us.
That's right, yeah. So we've got this one here. Today, in a nutshell, our fans arguing about US-Saudi relations. Prospective buyer lost court case with Barclays Academy director stood down as we knackered his own son. Our keeper dropped and kicking off about it, and our manager doing some B-Tech Cantona quote about daffodils. Don't forget the insightful John Joe interview. You forgot about Shelvey creeping up. How could you sum up an entire season in one line? Paragraph. Absolutely. I know, and even then, you're short of letters. I haven't counted up the letters there, but from hey, well done, mate. You got plenty in there.
He did. This is the second one sent by. It was Jeff Carter.
Yeah. Steve Wraith, recent discovery about the origin of football, further evidence for the Bruce out at NUFC in the form of postcard that the ancient tactical sphinx belongs at the foot of the football pyramid. Look at the photograph, absolutely classic. The Bruce Sphinx.
Well done, Jeff Carter. You made it into the top 4, top 5.
Midfielder Isaac. This one. Absolutely brilliant. Midfielder Isaac Hayden will miss the rest of the 2021 and Premier League season with a significant knee injury, but will not require surgery. Good news. He's only going to miss 2 training sessions.
Good one, John. Good one. This one was Steve's Tweet of the Week.
Yeah. And there you got Paul. LUFC doing more for NUFC this season than Steve Bruce. And it's true, isn't it?
Well done. Great stuff, as always.
There's been some great tweets. As long as the tweets are humorous and they're not libelous and they're not going to cause offence, you're in with a chance. We've got to remember that youngsters do watch the programme and families do sit. Because I know loads of families who actually watch this together and have a good laugh and probably cause arguments over the dinner table. But we'll have to keep it clean. There's been some absolute corker tweets, and for me, it's. We've got to use the humour, because there's so much going on, and we need the football humour back. We're missing the terrace humour. We're missing the wisecracks. You hear some great wisecracks at the match, and it does put a smile on your face when you're getting those wisecracks on Twitter instead of what you would have been missing on the terrace in the first place. And we've got there's one little bit of terrace humour that I think we'll probably throw in on the retro show on Wednesday that I was telling you guys about because we're doing Leicester City. So I think there's on Wednesday we might have some of that little bit of terrace humour from the old days.
Yeah, no, great. Honestly, great stuff. Keep them coming. And if you've got one you think we've missed, send it to Steve Hasty, send it to Mitch, or send it to me. But well done, Steve. That is our Tweet of the Week. Don't forget, competition. Now, all of you, bated breath. I know, Julie, you are waiting. I hadn't forgotten. I had my senior moments last week where I was forgetting things left, right and centre. This week, believe you me, I am completely on the ball. So, you had already had these clues. Picture of St James's Park and Alwyn. Last week's clue, 188 appearances and 6 goals. Nice picture of the Tyne Bridge there. This week's clue, a nighttime picture of the Tyne Bridge and the words Welsh International. So scribble that down, scribble your answer down, and put that away safely with your other answers. And next week we will have the final question. Chance to win 4 tickets for a pantomime. And of course, that comes from the lads at qtechshop.co.uk. And big shout out to Spider VPN, who sponsored us in February, sponsored us this month, and are going to sponsor us again next month. So big shout out to the lads. They can help you with your internet security. Huge thank you again this month to Geordie Riffs, premium guitar lessons for beginners and children, guitar repairs and service and recording studio. You can find them at the website geordieriffs.co.uk. Facebook, Geordie Riffs Official, and Instagram at Geordie Riffs. Give them a follow on their Instagram. As I've said each night, they're desperate for followers on Instagram. If you're on that particular platform, then please give them a follow. qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, and also Jab Signature, who make our flyers and have got some fantastic new boxing gear, training gear coming out very, very soon. First time visitor to the channel, subscribe like over 500 have in the last 7 days. Please subscribe to the channel, please give it a like by hitting the thumb the video, and give it a share. And those people sticking the thumbs down, thank you, because that helps the algorithm. Haters help. So if you want to stick your thumb down, it does help. Keep those comments coming in as well. Plenty comments, plenty positive comments, and plenty negative ones. It's all about opinions. If you missed the show, get yourself onto your local podcast provider when you're out walking the dog. And we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, all the good podcast providers. I am going to finish off, lads, with the question that we got asked right at the start of the programme by somebody, and they just wanted a simple question, a simple answer to a simple question, really, which is what I asked Malcolm and Gibbo. Are we going to go down or are we going to stay up, lads? Steve, staying up or going down?
Heart and head time, innit? Heart and head.
Yeah, it is.
And it's such a motive. It's just. I think we'll scrape ourselves survival by the skin of our teeth. I think we'll steal.
Do you think it's going to go to the last game, Steve?
No, I don't actually. I think that the law of probability says that we'll have to start winning some games, and I think that we've got the game in hand, and I think win a couple of games, and the pressure really does mount on the opposition. It mounts on Fulham, and I honestly can see somebody slipping down, and I can see us picking up some points. And again, it's all down to those players. It's down to what they can do, and they're professionals. And this is what I'm expecting from them. And quite frankly, if they can't pull this out the bag, then none of them actually deserve to be wearing the black and white shirt next season anyway.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Mitch, what's your take?
Told you. I've made my peace with it. I've made my peace with relegation. I see nothing from that club, nothing from that manager, nothing from that squad that tells me that they're going to do us the favour of keeping it up. If we stay up, it's because there's 3 teams worse than us. That's the only reason we will stay up. It should be in our hands, and it still is in our hands. But I've made my peace with it. This last week since the Brighton game, I was sitting the following day, having had a bit crack with Liam and the lads from the Gazette. During the match and after the match. I've made my peace with it. I think we're down.
Samantha L agrees. She says, me too, Mitch. I have made my peace. I think you're right, Steve. I think we're going to survive. I think it's going to be the skin of our teeth. I do. I've changed my mind, and I thought we'd go down, and I'm entitled to change my mind. And it might seem crazy. It might not. The pantomime was the quiz. Well, I just think we've got a chance of I don't know why, especially after that horrendous performance last week. But funnily enough, the Spurs game Steve, I think you're right. I think we'll get something out of next weekend's game. They're not exactly firing on all cylinders either. I think we'll get something next week. I think we'll be surprised. There's always good surprise results. There's always a team that surprises you with a turn of form. Maybe we've hit our bad form early.
Can you send me some of what you're smoking so I can stick it into this, mate?
Classic. Lads, as always, an absolute pleasure. Friday night wouldn't be Friday night without spending it with you, lads. And thank you to everybody in the chat. Been great. Nearly 700 watching again tonight. Honestly, fantastic. I keep saying we never, ever, ever take it for granted. People tuning in, and we're still... Honestly, we're amazed that you'll sit and listen to us old buggers chatting about Newcastle United, but we do enjoy it. I'm glad that you still enjoy it, and look forward to seeing you all again next Friday. But Steve, Mitch, have a good weekend, lads. Stay safe. Take care.
And you.
Take it easy, lads.